Welcome back to my channel. This will be the best forwards podcast in Fantasy Premier League, and you can see the most expensive players on screen. That includes Salah and Erling Haaland, the only two players to be priced at 14 million or above. Then you've got Alexander Isak in third, who costs 10.5 million, technically joint third with Cole Palmer. Bukayo Saka is also 10 million, and the rest are under that threshold. That includes Bruno Fernandes, who scored a brace in that 2-1 win against West Ham, Ollie Watkins, who scored in a 2-2 draw against Frankfurt, and Morgan Rogers was the other scorer. Then you've got Florian Wirtz, who comes in at 8.5 million, and Marmoush, who has been reclassified from a forward to a midfielder, and Heung-min Son still costs 8.5 million as well. Victor Gyökeres will be in between 9 to 10 million, I expect, but the price will be revealed in a couple of hours, I believe, and that will also be reflected in the graphics you see on screen. But he will be ranked in this list of the top 20 forwards in Fantasy Premier League, and there'll be other forwards discussed in future videos who might not make the cut for this list, but they can still offer great value or be massive differentials in the process. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, links to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. When I covered Euro Fantasy last summer, Niklas Füllkrug was a decent option for Germany. He started a few games for them and also came off the bench and made an immediate impact. In the Premier League last season, he only got 3 goals and 2 assists in a matter of 6 starts, so the FPL points weren't impressive at all, with only 42 delivered throughout the season, and his ownership is quite low at 1.2%. The same goes for his price tag at 6 million, but it is Sunderland away in GW1. That's a very appealing fixture on paper. Then it's Chelsea, Nottingham Forest and Tottenham Hotspur, but West Ham's long-term fixtures are certainly viable, but Füllkrug will be overshadowed by his teammate Jarrod Bowen, who scored against Man United in that 2-1 defeat in a recent friendly, and I think he'll be the standout West Ham asset overall, let alone in the forward line. He costs 2 million more than Füllkrug, but he's going to offer more consistency in terms of minutes, starts, goals and assists, so he is definitely the standout, and if you are picking a West Ham forward, he is the choice all day long. But Füllkrug could be decent. He comes in at number 20 in this ranking, but I've ranked several newly promoted clubs and their strikers slightly higher, and Fleming is one of them. His price is even cheaper at 5.5 million, and the ownership figure is 0.3%, so this is a massive differential, and Burnley's opening fixtures are quite tough, but they do have Sunderland at home in Game Week 2. He scored 12 times in the Championship last season and got 4 assists. Most people will invest in Barnes as their 4.5 million enabler, and whilst he has Premier League experience, he didn't start a single game for Burnley last season, so Fleming is the undisputed number 1 striker, and his XG was 9.05 across all competitions. He registered 18 goal contributions, so the vast majority of them came in the Championship. But I believe there's a better forward from a newly promoted club, and that's going to go to Pirro from Leeds United. He got 19 goals and 7 assists last season in 48 games, and the numbers are very sustainable in terms of the XG, big chances. 17.17 is very healthy. He overperformed that ever so slightly with 19 goals, but if he can translate that form from the Championship to the Premier League and match that sort of conversion rate, he's going to be a decent option at 5.5 million. The ownership is 3.6%, and Leeds do start things off against Everton at home, but then it's Arsenal away, Newcastle at home and Fulham away. So their fixtures are quite mixed bag, especially over the first 4 game weeks, and in terms of the best fixtures, that will go to Sunderland from the newly promoted clubs, and the likes of Mayenda might pique your interest, but I do rank Pirro and Fleming even higher than Mayenda, and let's see if any other transfer activities go on with those clubs. Now, Barry is a new signing for Everton, and he should start over Beto, in my opinion, despite the fact that the Portuguese striker actually got a few goals in pre-season, but Barry scored 11 times for Villarreal in the last campaign with 4 assists. He also played 41 games, and across all competitions, he registered 23 goals and assists combined. His ownership is also very low at 1.9%, and his price tag is quite accessible at 6 million. Everton's fixtures are solid, as covered in my recent podcast, facing Leeds and Wolves away over the first 3 game weeks, and I think Barry could be a decent signing there for the Toffees, and David Moyes does get the best out of his strikers. We saw that with Beto last season, even though he's quite unreliable, and we could see a bit of rotation going on, or sometimes they'll play together in a 4-4-2, but Barry is a solid choice, and he's my favourite Everton attacker at this moment in time. Moving on though to number 16, Raul Jimenez might be a little bit underrated. He got 147 FPL points last season with 12 goals and 3 assists, and the shot volume is incredible. 96 shots, despite the fact that Maniz is always kind of breathing down his neck, not literally, coming off the bench and sometimes getting the occasional start. But in the previous campaign, Raul Jimenez was the undisputed number 9 for Fulham, and the opening fixtures are decent, facing Brighton and Man United in the opening 2. Then it's a local derby against Chelsea away, followed by Leeds at home, which is fairly decent in my opinion. And Jimenez is a bit of a difficult one to predict. Sometimes he does well against the bigger clubs and the tougher defences, and when he's got a plum fixture, he does fail to deliver from time to time. But I still think he's a massive differential with 2.4% ownership, and if you are picking a Fulham attacker, Iwobi might be the best one, but Raul Jimenez is a close second, and I would definitely pick him over Rodrigo Muniz right now. Havertz is in 15th place. You might argue that's a bit too low, and maybe in Game Week 1, he starts at the expense of Viktor Gyökeres, which would send some Arsenal fans to not Cloud9. What's the opposite of that? Let me know down in the comment section below. But facing United away in Game Week 1, Havertz can do well in some of these games, and he's going to get plenty of starts in the midfield and forward line, and Arsenal might sometimes switch to a 4-4-2 or just have him playing alongside Viktor Gyökeres as a floating striker or attacking midfielder, so to speak. He only got 9 goals and 3 assists last season in a campaign riddled with injuries, especially towards the end of the campaign. He also got 23 big chances and 97 FPL points, but in the calendar year of 2024, he was actually putting in some very good numbers when he played up front in every single game, and he was matching some of the best assets in the game, like Cole Palmer during some of his purple patches, and competing with the likes of Salah and Erling Haaland with very comparable numbers. But over a 38-game season, Kai Havertz can't be relied upon as the only striker. Arsenal needed to get a new number 9 who is more prolific and has a better conversion rate, and I do think eventually Gyökeres will become the undisputed number 1 choice up front, and Kai Havertz will play a secondary role there. But let's wait and see, because Arteta is a big fan of him, and some reports suggest that the plan right now is to kind of not over-rely on either one of Gyökeres or Kai Havertz, which would be lunacy in my opinion. But of course Arteta does have some tactical nous and he knows what he's doing, but I think that sort of thing would definitely be under question by many Arsenal fans. But Kai Havertz has good underlying stats across the board, but the fixtures aren't really there for Arsenal, and I would put Kai Havertz quite low in this list compared to what I would have done last season off the back of a very decent debut campaign, especially in the second half of that season. But I think recently Kai Havertz has proven to be a liability in front of goal from time to time, especially in crucial moments. Coming in though at number 14, I've gone for Ekitike, and you could definitely swap these two around, because if Liverpool sign Isak, I think Ekitike might even go down this list because he might not even start games for Liverpool, but it all depends on the transfer activity. If they sell Luis Diaz and Darwin Nunez, we could see a formation with Ekitike on the left wing, Isak up front, and then Salah on the right. Wirtz would be in the midfield, but there are also a few predicted lineups which have Wirtz playing in Diaz's role, so to speak, and he can invert and play as the second striker, so it all depends there. But Ekitike being signed for around 80 million, then being on the bench, does seem a bit crazy, but Liverpool are showing ambition in this transfer window, and Ekitike is quite similar in profile to Alexander Isak. He had 15 goals and 8 assists in the Bundesliga last season, and he also impressed in the Europa League with 4 goals. One of them was against Tottenham Hotspur in the quarter-final, and across all competitions he delivered 34 goal contributions, which is very decent for a player of his age. His ownership is 3.7%, and that's only going to rise at this moment in time. But if Alexander Isak is confirmed, that could go back down very soon. The price tag is quite high at 8.5 million. If he came in at 7.5 to 8, I think he'd be very popular. So maybe the pricing is fairly good from that perspective. And after the first 3 game weeks, Liverpool have a nice fixture swing, starting off with Burnley away in game week 4. Would you put Ekitike at number 14 or maybe a bit higher on this list? Let me know down in the comment section below. But Danny Welbeck scored 4 goals in Brighton's opening pre-season game, and he got 10 goals and 5 assists last season with 15 bonus points and over 120 FPL points overall. He's not the biggest differential you'll ever see with 8.4% ownership, but I think that will actually drop over the next couple of weeks, and both Welbeck and Matoma are the standout Brighton assets, particularly in the offensive line. You've also got De Kuyper, who might be very interesting at left wing back, so those 3 definitely need to be monitored right now, and Brighton's opening fixtures are quite decent. They're not the worst, They're definitely not as bad as United's, for example, but I think they can still do quite well against some of the best teams in the country, like Man City. So Danny Welbeck is still a solid choice, and I think he'll be relied upon even more this season after the departure of Joao Pedro. Let's go on now to different sorts of options here, and Strand Larsen is priced at the exact same, but he's a different type of striker to Danny Welbeck, and he should be on penalties now after the departure of Matheus Cunha. His ownership is 6.6%. He got 14 goals in his debut Premier League campaign, which is very impressive, with 23 big chances and 145 FPL points. I also think selling Cunha means that Strand Larsen will get more bonus points for Wolves this season, and if he's on penalties, that's only going to boost his appeal even further. He could easily get to 15 plus Premier League goals in this campaign, and I think he'll be the main attacker for Wolves, despite the signing of Arias, who comes in at 5.5 million. Those two would be my favourite options from Wolves, but Strand Larsen is at number one at this moment in time. There is Man City at home and Newcastle away over the first 4 game weeks. Even Bournemouth away isn't the easiest of fixtures, but Everton looks quite decent on paper, and I think Strand Larsen can score against all of these teams in any given game week. Let's go on now to a more expensive option in Evanescence, who comes in at 7 million, and his ownership is much lower at 2.9%, and a key reason why is because of that opening fixture against Liverpool away. But Evanescence did fairly well against some of the best clubs last season, like Arsenal and Manchester City, with 10 goals and 5 assists and 23 big chances, which is identical to Strand Larsen. He only got 128 FPL points, but I think he'll get even more bonus points this time round, and I think he's a very decent asset, and he did very well for Porto as well over the years. I think some people kind of touted him as the worst summer signing last season or one of the biggest disappointments, but he's been fairly decent for Bournemouth, and he offers more than the goals. The link-up play is good, and he also has good positioning for a striker, so he always gets into those areas that gives others space, like Semenyo, and he can also get on the end of some chances himself. But Evanescence is still decent, and the same goes for Chris Wood, who would have been ranked much higher last season, but I do expect a drop-off. He scored in a recent pre-season friendly when Nottingham Forest lost 3-1, and Morgan Gibbs-White signed a contract extension after all the kerfuffle about moving to Tottenham Hotspur. So that's another saga in this transfer window. There's a lot to discuss, of course, with the summer signings, but that is a massive boost for Nottingham Forest, and keeping him could mean that Chris Wood remains a solid choice in FPL because he has that main source of creativity. But the departure of Anthony Elanga will still be a sore one for Nottingham Forest. I think that will be a massive miss in terms of the directness and also the creativity, the crossing and the threat, just going straight to Chris Wood with the opportunities. But he will still get plenty himself with 41 bonus points over 20 big chances. He scored 20 goals last season. I would expect a drop-off in this campaign, but he can still get 10 plus goals very easily, and maybe he'll get to 15, which would be a solid return once again. He got to 200 FPL points, so he was part of an exclusive club with Brian Mbeumo, Palmer, Salah, and I think that was pretty much it. I did cover this, of course, in a recent video, but Chris Wood is still one of the best assets in the game, and I think at 7.5 million, he still offers decent value. The fixtures are also good, facing Brentford, Crystal Palace, and West Ham in the opening 3. Then it's Arsenal away, but the long-term fixtures for Nottingham Forest remain very strong. But despite all of the good things about Chris Wood, he comes in at number 10, which might seem very low for a striker who was so prolific the last season. Jean-Philippe Mateta is ranked slightly higher at number 9. He only got 150 FPL points, which pales in comparison to Chris Wood, but he was a bonus points machine as well with 27. He also got multiple big chances, over 20, and the underlying stats are even better than Chris Wood. He got 14 goals and 2 assists. The ownership figure is quite low at 6.4%, and the price tag is still reasonable, but Crystal Palace's opening 3 fixtures are quite tough, and you might want to avoid Mateta until Game Week 4 when he faces Sunderland at home. I think that could be the best fixture that any team can have this season, and they would be the favourites to get relegated, but let's wait and see, and hopefully the newly promoted clubs have a chance of competing and surviving in the upcoming season. And in terms of attackers that Crystal Palace have to offer, there is Eze and Ismail Assar, but Eze could move to Arsenal and he is heavily linked with a move away. And then you've got Mateta. I think he's the best one. He'll get the bulk of the big chances. Sarr might offer the best value at 6.5 million, but Mateta will be on penalties and also have that sort of threat from open play at all times. He can get the odd assist, but it's really the goal scoring that he's going to offer you every single week, and he can get to 20 Premier League goals at one point, but I think 15 is probably a more realistic expectation. He started a bit slowly, just like Crystal Palace, but as the season went on, he only got better and better and also helped them lift the FA Cup. At number 8, I've gone for Dominic Solanke, who was quite poor last season, just like Tottenham Hotspur. They finished 17th, but they also won the Europa League, and I think Solanke's going to have a big season under Thomas Frank, who got the best out of Ivan Toney, Visser, and Brian Mbeumo. I'm fairly confident that Solanke will be next, but Tottenham Hotspur have been fairly underwhelming in pre-season. They beat Reading 2-0 and then played 2 friendlies in the space of 5 hours with completely different teams. They drew 0-0 against Luton Town in the recent friendly and also 2-2 against Wycombe Wanderers. But Solanke should be a solid asset. The question would be, do we invest in Solanke or Kudus? Maybe even both. That would certainly be viable in fixtures like Burnley at home in Game Week 1, and despite their great record against Man City, I still think that's a tough fixture, and we could see a different Man City this season compared to what we did in the previous campaign, but the same can definitely apply to Tottenham Hotspur. We all expect them to rise up the table and not finish anywhere near 17th this time round. I think they could definitely aim for a top 8 finish, and it wouldn't be a complete surprise if they qualified for the Europa League or even higher. Solanke got 9 goals and 5 assists in the previous campaign with 20 big chances and only 108 FPL points, which is much worse than a lot of the strikers on this list, but his ownership remains quite template at 18.2%, so a lot of people are quite bullish on Tottenham Hotspur and some of their attackers, and Dominic Solanke might be the best of the bunch. At number 7 though, Visser is still there, but he is refusing to train right now. I'm not sure if Gyökeres is setting an example to the likes of Isak, and of course that's causing a domino effect with Visser because he would be the Isak replacement at Newcastle. Sesko is also linked with the Toon, and I think Visser is still really pushing for this move, and he had a gentleman's agreement with Brentford about leaving for 26 million, but Brentford now want 50 million from Newcastle. So let's keep an eye out for this situation, and any updates will be covered on this channel as well. But Visser will be a great option regardless of whether he's at Newcastle or Brentford, but as the starting striker for Newcastle, he's going to get so many big chances, and you also don't have Mbeumo, who will take some of the goals and the penalties, so I think Visser could be even better if he were to make a move, but that remains to be seen, and irrespective of that, he's going to rank very highly on my list. He got 18 goals and 6 assists last season with 34 big chances and 185 FPL points. These are incredible numbers for a striker who was priced so cheaply last season, and he has seen a price rise to 7.5 million, and the ownership is just under 10%. I think also the uncertainty about his future might play a part in a reduction in the ownership figure because it was around 11 to 12% only a few days ago. It is Sunderland away in Game Week 3 should he stay at Brentford, but that does seem unlikely at this moment in time. Let's see if Newcastle finally fork out some money and reinvigorate that squad, because it was all looking so promising when they signed Elanga, but now several players are rumoured to leave. They didn't get Trafford, and of course Isak handed in that transfer request, and maybe the lack of ambition is a key reason why he has made that sort of move. But Visser would be a good signing. It might not be enough for Newcastle in terms of depth and quality, so signing Sesko and Visser would be brilliant. That wouldn't really make Visser that appealing if he had another striker who is rotating with him, so there's a lot of question marks up in the air, and that could ultimately influence whether Visser is ranked lower on this list or a little bit higher. But at this moment in time, he narrowly misses out on the top 5, and the same goes for the next striker in Jarrod Bowen, who comes in at 8 million, and he was an even better option as a midfielder, but he looked very sharp in pre-season in the recent friendlies. He scored against Man United and had a great performance on the right in the previous friendly. He got 13 goals and 11 fantasy assists in the previous Premier League campaign with 87 shots, solid underlying numbers all round, and close to 200 FPL points overall. He had an outstanding end to the season. He was returning in every single game virtually. I think he actually got a goal or assist in the last 8 Premier League games. His ownership is 20.6%, and the opening fixture is brilliant on paper. I know some people are saying, I don't trust West Ham, Sunderland can win. That could be absolutely correct, but does that mean Jarrod Bowen is going to blank for sure? Not really. Sunderland could win 2-1 or 3-1, maybe even 3-2, and Bowen gets a few goal contributions. So I don't think we should underestimate Bowen just because West Ham have been poor over the last couple of years, because he's always delivered for them, irrespective of the manager, the tactics, and which position he's playing in, on the right-hand side, if it's as a second striker, or down the middle. But I do think this reclassification has definitely hindered his appeal a little bit, and ultimately he should be a midfielder in FPL next season. Otherwise, we might as well make the likes of Salah a forward as well. That's the way I see it, and a lot of people share that view, but not everyone will have that same opinion, and that's what football and FPL is all about. But from West Ham's perspective, Bowen is by far the best asset they have to offer. Wan-Bissaka is certainly decent in that defensive line. Kilman will get a lot of defensive contributions. You've also got Thomas Soucek as a budget midfielder, but I think ultimately Jarrod Bowen is by far the best option. There is no comparison, and I would spend the 2 million more on him compared to Fulkrug, which I talked about earlier in this video. But coming in at number 5 is João Pedro, who isn't the most prolific of strikers, but he's still very young, an expert penalty taker, but that will be reduced in terms of his fantasy appeal because Cole Palmer is still the number 1 taker and João Pedro would be second in command. He got 10 goals and 6 assists for Brighton in the previous campaign with 17 big chances, 126 FPL points, and also a lot of bonus points, which is something that João Pedro has to offer. He made an immediate impact for Chelsea in the first few games. He came off the bench against Palmeiras and did fairly well, scored a brace against Fluminense in his first start, and then scored in the Club World Cup final against PSG, helping Chelsea lift the trophy, and his ownership is 60%. That could rise even further as we approach Game Week 1, but that 7.5 million price tag, the move to Chelsea, and the Club World Cup and recent form have definitely all played a part in João Pedro's high ownership, and not only that, he is the highest owned player in the game, even over Mohamed Salah at this moment in time. But Chelsea's opening fixtures are brilliant. I would expect them to win the vast majority of them, and we could play it into this narrative of Chelsea being a title challenger in the upcoming season. There might be a drop-off later on in the campaign, but I think Chelsea are one of the favourites to finish in the top 4 no matter what, and they could make that push to 3rd or 2nd in the table, but I still think they lack a little bit to go on to win the title with Robert Sanchez in goal and a few weak defenders in their ranks. But there are 4 better forwards in FPL, in my opinion, and one of them is Ollie Watkins. Despite the fact he costs 1.5 million more than João Pedro, his ownership is 10.2%, so it has crept up in recent days. He scored in a recent friendly against Frankfurt, that 2-2 draw, with 16 goals and 8 assists last season. He also got 40 big chances, healthy XG numbers and shot volume, and 186 FPL points. He has outscored Erling Haaland over the last 2 seasons combined, and I think Watkins is competitive and comparable with the best assets in the game. From a captaincy perspective, he might not offer the same ceiling and double-digit haul potential on a regular basis that Palmer, Salah, Isak and Erling Haaland do, but I think he's very reliable and he's in that sort of upper echelon of FPL assets in the top 5 to 10 in the game overall. And Aston Villa have good opening fixtures up until Game Week 8 and even beyond that, but they are ranked top of the FDR for the first 8 game weeks of the season. So I think Aston Villa, from a fixtures perspective, from Ollie Watkins' goal scoring potential and the assists, there are so many things to like with this pick, but he narrowly misses out on the top 3. Instead, I have gone for Viktor Gyökeres in the podium, and of course the price is really important in this, but I think he offers great value, and he scored 39 goals in the Portuguese leagues last season with 8 assists and also 6 goals in 8 games in the Champions League, so I covered them extensively in Use Your Fantasy, and across all competitions he got 67 goal contributions, which is absolutely insane, the most of any player throughout Europe. And I think at Arsenal he's not going to match these numbers, but he can still get very healthy returns and establish himself as the main striker, even though some reports indicate that he will get the occasional rest or kind of switch with Kai Havertz from time to time, which I think would be insane. But Arsenal's opening fixtures are poor. In Game Week 2, you might want to triple captain someone like Saka or Gyökeres against Leeds at home. That is certainly a decent play. But in the other fixtures, you might want to go without them and just assess the situation, see if Gyökeres gets the game time necessary to be one of the best assets in FPL. But he narrowly misses out on the top 2 spots because that's going to go to a certain Swede in Alexander Isak, who has very good numbers as well for club and country. Maybe not to the same level as Gyökeres, but he has played in a better league. 23 goals and 6 assists last season with 36 big chances and over 200 FPL points. That's the other player who also reached the 200 club with a 10.5 million price tag. I think Isak, whether he stays at Newcastle or moves to Liverpool, is going to be right up there. Maybe that move to Liverpool would make him number 1 in the best forwards, but that would also mean no penalties for him, as Salah is still the designated taker. I also think McAllister is an expert penalty taker as well, so Isak wouldn't have it all his way like he does at Newcastle, but his record from the spot is also brilliant, facing Aston Villa and Liverpool in the opening 2 game weeks. Should he stay at Newcastle, would prove to be quite tough, but he can score in both games, and then it's Leeds away and Wolves at home. But Isak versus Gyökeres, that's definitely a big debate for the upcoming season, and I think Gyökeres at the cheaper price tag would prove to be the more popular choice, especially with all the transfer saga going around Alexander Isak. But maybe that won't be the case because his ownership is currently 36.8%, and that could rise even further once we have clarity on his future. He's Premier League proven, he's done a brilliant job for Newcastle over the years, but at number 1, it is still going to be Erling Haaland for me, coming in at 14 million. At this time last year, he was such a template pick. He had a great pre-season and then started the Premier League campaign on fire with multiple hat-tricks and braces. Then there was a slight downturn in form in Game Week 6, and then Man City just fell off a cliff around Game Week 8 or 9, and Erling Haaland also dropped as an FPL asset. He simply wasn't worth that 15 million price tag. He missed a few games due to injury, and that's something that's always been a concern ever since his Borussia Dortmund days. But I think Erling Haaland will still get 200 plus FPL points very comfortably. He's the second or third best FPL asset in the game, but Salah is still the standout because he is a midfielder. He always has that advantage of scoring a goal, so he gets an extra point for that. The same applies for a clean sheet, and in terms of the bonus point system, Salah would be favoured because he creates chances and also scores them, but Haaland is still the second or third best asset in the game, and amongst forwards, he is number 1. He might not offer the same value as one of the cheaper options on this list, or even Gyökeres, Isak, and Ollie Watkins, but what he is a reliable captaincy option who could rival Mohamed Salah from time to time. So if you do go without the Egyptian and want to go against the template, Erling Haaland could be a somewhat differential play and really help you have a great start in Fantasy Premier League. This will be covered in some of my upcoming drafts, but Haaland's numbers are always ridiculous. 41 big chances, 22 goals, 3 assists. The shots in the box, XG, are comparable to Mohamed Salah, who had his best ever season. 181 FPL points is quite poor for Haaland's high standards, but he missed a lot of games, of course, and the opening fixtures are solid for Man City. There could be a lot of rotation there, especially with the other forwards, and look at the defensive line. There isn't really any stability at the moment, but Erling Haaland will start most games, at least 30 plus, and if he can stay fit, that might even rise to 35 plus, but at this sort of price tag, you really need Haaland to start week in, week out, and if you get in on Haaland at the right time, you only benefit in FPL. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and what are your predictions for Game Week 1? These are currently how things stand for me, and this could definitely be subject to change. You'll see my final predictions, of course, in the Game Week 1 deadline stream. Liverpool 3, Bournemouth 1, Aston Villa 3, Newcastle 2. So I'm going for some high-scoring games in the opening fixtures. Brighton 2, Fulham 2, Sunderland 1, West Ham 2, Tottenham Hotspur 3, Burnley 1, Wolves 1, Man City 2, Chelsea 1, Crystal Palace 0, Nottingham Forest 1, Brentford 1, Man United 1, Arsenal 2, and then Leeds 2, Everton 2. So you definitely will have different predictions. That's what it's all about. We can discuss this in the Discord server and all these different social media platforms. Let's continue the conversation. The same goes for the comment section of this video. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Championships, for early access to my videos, Marksman of the Pucks, the Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon, more FPL podcasts. The same goes for UCL Fantasy as well, and keep your eyes peeled for the Game Week 1 deadline stream.